Okay, we're ready to begin. We're going to start where we started yesterday in Matthew 23, verse 23 through 26. And we're going to do a brief review. But the major focus of what we're going to do today is to focus on this false simulated reality in order to give us a clearer and more precise understanding and comprehension of what it actually is. We've been saying that it is a result, the false simulated matrix is the result of mind. It is the result of mind. That is how it's created, by mind. It is created mentally. And we're going to take a look at that, a deeper look at that today, because again, the goal is wholeness, oneness, and unity. But if you do not know what it is that you are unifying specifically, it's going to be very problematic to be effective at it, to be effective at reaching our goal of wholeness and unity. So, Matthew 23, starting at the 23rd verse, it reads, "Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith. These ye ought to have done, and not to leave the other undone. Ye blind guides, which strain at a gnat and swallow a camel. Woe unto you, Pharisees, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye make clean the outside of the cup and the platter, but within they are full of extortion and excess. Thou blind Pharisee, cleanse first that which is within the cup and platter, and the outside of them may be clean also." So, from a physical standpoint, see, we know that there is no inner or outer. We know that there is no above or below from a holistic perspective. But we have to start where we are. X marks the spot. So we'll talk in terms of inner and outer. The overall thought here is that the individuals described as the Pharisees and scribes are taking an approach that does not consider that the starting point is you. The starting point is you, always you. It always is inner. The journey is always inward, not outward. This is the allegory, the expression, to clean the inside or to focus on the inside first. And that if you do that, the outside would be clean also. Now they're using the symbols of a cup of washing or cleansing, a cup and a platter. Now anyone knows that if you've ever washed dishes, listen, that cleaning the outside, the inside of the cup will not make the outside clean also. So this is an allegory. There's no way you can physically clean the inside of the cup and the outside be clean also. It is talking about something that is beyond a physical exercise. It is talking about us going inward and focusing on the energetic aspects of things rather than the physical aspects of things. Our efforts, by and large, to solve the simulated matrix has been from within the simulated matrix or within mind. We are trying to solve problems with mind. The mind is in and of the simulated matrix. And I'm talking about mind as a thing that is binding. To mind, we say behave, obey. It is the aspect of our mentality that keeps us binded to the physical matrix. But the mind, like Nasik has been teaching us, is an illusion as well. It is a falsity, but we're talking in terms, deliberately in terms of the simulated matrix. Verse 23 talks about the weightier matters of the law must be included. And just like the inside of the cup is symbolic or emblematic of the energetic nature of things, the weightier matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith, are not in the same manner talking about any moralistic ideas or conceptions that we have in terms of judgment, mercy, and faith. That these three things are representative of higher conceptions, higher ideas, higher elements. We took a look at Galatians 4, again, verses 9 and 10. And it reads on this wise, but now after that ye have known God, or rather are known of God, how turn ye again to the weak and beggarly elements, whereunto ye desire again to be in bondage. Okay, again, these binding elements, these binding ideas, these binding elements of the false simulated matrix, weak and beggarly, that keeps us connected to the false simulated matrix. And verse 10 says that ye observe days, months, times, and years. This is referring to the religious mindset. The religious mindset. Religion literally means to reattach, to rebind, to tie again into. This is the aspect of bondage that is located and created within the religious mind. Religion, relegare in the Latin, relegare. A ligature is something that ties you into something else, that keeps you tied into the false simulated matrix, keeps you tied into mind. The transition must be made from a human mentality, a human perception, which is the programmed mind, the mind that was programmed within this false simulated matrix. We're going to talk about this very specifically. We talk often, yes, we talk often, hold on, of the compulsory educational system. That is one part of it. But we're going to talk as well about some mass social conditioning that has taken place in these different eras, ages, and epochs that are recent. Go ahead, Malkia. Go on with your comment, Malkia.
Also, you can't spell religion without ego. So we see that the ego is tied into this religion, this mind.
Absolutely. The ego is the binding element within us.
Mm-hmm.
Within us. That's very good. So that is the inside of the cup. That is an energetic quality inside the cup as well. Very good. That keeps us bound to our human nature, bound to our lower nature, bound to those beggarly elements of what we call reality. Verse 10 says, Ye observe days, months, times, and years. Again, that's referring to this religious orientation, the religious mind, and that the ethos is that man, through servitude, through work, listen, through work, through service, through work, can reach God, can get right with God, observing these particular days, holy days, months, Shabbats, etc., and so on. That these are things that tend to bind. All right? We're going to talk about this all within context now and deconstruct this whole thing so that we understand thoroughly what the false simulated matrix is. We think that we can get right with God through these observances. That's what religion tells us, that we have to reconcile with God, that we have to get right with God. This is inverted thinking because the entire universe, the entire created, the entire cosmos is awaiting the opposite thing, for God to get right, for God to get straightened out. Because as we emanated in here, we also inverted. And it inverted our thinking, it inverted our mentality, it inverted our perception, and we view ourselves as being separate from the so-called created universe. That is just us turned inside out. What we view as outside of us is actually inside of us. And I'm not talking in physical terms. You're going to understand perfectly what this means as we go through this, as we walk through this. It is just a mere projection. The world that you perceive that is outside of you, it is just a mere projection that you as the projector are projecting. When you can see that, then you'll understand perfectly the simulated matrix in its essence. We're going to find out that there's no such thing as physical or material as we walk through this. So these three elements, as we talked about yesterday very clearly, judgment is the Greek word krisis, which talks about separating, sundering, a separation. That is one of the main weightier matters of the law. If you do not consider duality, you will remain in bondage. There's no way to escape this. If you do not consider, first and foremost, and comprehend the aspect of duality in the world that we inhabit, you will remain stuck. This is the number one element that we must consider if we are to escape, if we are to rise above, if we are to ascend out of our predicament. So it uses the word, it translates as judgment, but the higher conception is talking about duality. In the actual Greek, grammatically, when you look at Matthew 23, it is not the weightier matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith. It actually states it judgment and mercy and faith. It is the word krisis kai, krisis kai. And this was deliberately done because the polarities must be juxtaposed. If there is separation, there is unity. Where you have separation, you have unity. And where you have unity, you have separation. So it uses these words, our ancestors used these words in conjunction, krisis kai. And kai is referring to a copulative, something that connects or unites. So within the idea, within the concept of separation and duality, exists the concept of unity. We must understand this. And within the concept of unity is the concept of separation and duality. We have to conceptualize that. This is what this allegory is designed to communicate to us. Not the fact that Kai is just translated as the word and. It is communicating to us a higher thought, krisis Kai, duality and unity, duality and unity. Later we're going to see that death and life are united concepts. We must have this idea of balance and wholeness of these energetic concepts if we are going to rise, if we are going to set in motion our ascension. Very, very important. Copulative means joining together, expressing addition of their meanings, groups of words expressing addition, uniting, serving to couple. It is related to the word copulate, meaning to engage in sexual intercourse. The Bible talks about this as two becoming one flesh. This is a physical union, the physical expression of unity of two things, male and female, masculine and feminine. Is everyone with me?
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of unity is within the idea Nested within the idea of unity is the idea of separation. Nested within the idea of separation is the idea of unity. That is holistic thought, making the two things one. Psalms 85, show us mercy and grant us salvation. I will hear what God, the Lord, will speak, for he will speak peace. Now, this word peace is the word shalom, all right, unto his people and to his saints, to let them not turn again to folly. Surely his salvation is nigh them that fear him, and the glory may dwell in our land. Mercy and truth are met together, righteousness and peace have kissed each together. Okay, the story, the idea again of copulation, joining together, of marriage. How do you consummate a marriage in modern society? Legally, how is a marriage consummated? Does anyone know?
Is that a question, Show?
Yes. How legally in today's society do they determine legally that a marriage has been consummated?
A marriage license?
No, it's after the marriage license. What do you do on the honeymoon?
Oh, I got
What do you do on the
you.
honeymoon?
Yeah.
Copulation.
You
Hmm.
copulate. You copulate. Absolutely. You copulate, join together the two things that had been separated. And family, there is a science to this. They give the rings to indicate what? Eternity. The joining together of two things in a single whole, as a single whole. We're going to really understand why these symbols have been used from a scientific standpoint as we go forward. So, judgment, talking about separation or duality. Within that concept itself is the concept of unity, and unity in separation, separation in unity, a single holistic concept. Mercy, Elios, meaning affinity, compassion. All right? Affinity and compassion. This is when talking in religious terms or allegorical terms, the separation of man and God. When they talk about rectifying that relationship, it is always the element of love or affinity that is expressed. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, etc., and so on. So, this affinity and compassion in the allegory is externalized in a God that is outside of ourselves, right?
Hmm.
And our whole religious practice or the practice of our belief system is to incite this compassion through repentance, to incite compassion through repentance of an external God. Am I not correct?
Hmm.
So that he saves us. But this compassion, this idea of mercy, of affinity, it has to be internalized, turned inside. This is an energetic element. And when we look at the word Elios, we're going to connect it later on to a word that we call love. All right? That we call love. But suffice it to say that this is a divine energetic attribute that must be activated. And we'll talk about this a little further. The word faith is the word pistis. It's the word pistis. And then we talked about this at length yesterday. We won't go back into it, but it talks about this idea, this unifying idea, this syncretizing idea that we understand the allegory of the Pistis Sophia. It talks about our emanation into the physical realms of duality and the return back, all right, to what we were and are originally. We are not created beings. Pistis Sophia talks about how divinity emanated within the physical material realms in a deliberately and purposefully premature, incomplete, and flawed manner. So these, family, are the weightier aspects, the weightier matters that must be considered, that cannot be omitted if we are going to reverse this process. And in Matthew 23 to 26, it was just an allegorical expression of an introduction of these three critical points. The fact that duality within duality is unity. Within unity, there is duality. And these things must be viewed in balance, in wholeness. All right? And the idea that we are divine beings that emanated into an imperfect, simulated false matrix. A book was presented to me just this morning that is called Atomic Suicide, and it's by Walter and Leo Russell. It was published in 1957, and this is a very critical period, as we'll see, because what developed around that time and up to the previous time has affected our mentality, has affected our thought and perception in a very profound manner, very unique manner. And we're going to take a look at it. And we're going to take a look at what these individuals presented at that time from their very unique perception. And as we go through this, again, family, you're going to understand how significant this is in terms of us having a clearer perception of this false simulated matrix. This is Prelude. Atomic Suicide. Very interesting title. And we're gonna understand perfectly who they were trying to kill or what they were trying to kill relative to this atomic suicide, and it's related to the atomic age. The atomic age, also known as the atomic era, is a period of history following the detonation of the first nuclear or atomic bomb. That nuclear atomic bomb family was called Trinity.
Mm. Wow. Wow. Man.
Are y'all with me? Are y'all
Man.
with me now? Get on board.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Dates are very important. It occurred on July 16th. The anniversary of this just passed us up.
Yes.
It occurred on July 16th, 1945, during World War II. Although nuclear chain reactions have been hypothesized in 1933, keep these dates in mind, in the first artificial self-sustaining nuclear reaction, Chicago Pile 1, had taken place in December 1942. In December 1942. These 3 decades of the 30s, the 20s rather, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s are going to be very, very important. And we're gonna highlight these things in that period. The Trinity test and the ensuing bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki that ended World War II represent the first large-scale use of nuclear technology. Listen, and ushered in profound changes in socio-political thinking and the course of technological development. Ushered in profound changes in
Mm-hmm.
socio-political thinking and the course of technology development. Now, if we think that this did not affect our thinking and our perception, we're fooling ourselves. This was very important. And it was done in a very profound, very dramatic, very traumatic, large scale manner. And it had a profound, it marked a profound or ushered in, activated profound changes in socio political thinking. The next development, or a corresponding development, the War of the Worlds, the War of the Worlds broadcast, all right,
Mm-hmm.
is an episode of the American radio drama anthology series, The Mercury Theater on the Air. It was performed as a Halloween episode of the series on Sunday, October 30th, 1938. So you have in 1933 the first artificial self-sustaining nuclear chain reaction.
Mm-hmm.
5 years later, you have
Mm-hmm.
this broadcast of the War of the Worlds. Remember, all of this was framed under the heading war. One was a very real war, World War II,
Mm-hmm.
that ended in 1942 with the dropping of this nuclear bomb. Family, 4 years earlier, you have this radio broadcast that is a setup for what is about to take place on the world stage. It was an episode of the series on Sunday, October 1938. It's careful planning and aired over the Colombian broadcast system, that's CBS radio network. Directed and narrated by actor and future filmmaker Orson Welles. The episode was an adaptation of H.G. Wells' novel The War of the Worlds, 1898. Now, if you're familiar with H.G. Wells and his esoteric connections, you really understand what is occurring here. It became famous for allegedly causing mass panic, which it did, through
Yep.
although the scale of panic is disputed as the program had relatively few listeners. The program began with the theme music from the Mercury Theater on air and an announcement that the evening show was an adaptation of The War of the Worlds. This was followed by a prologue read by Orson Welles, which was closely based on the opening of the H.G. Wells novel. They're doing something here, family. The next
Mm-hmm.
hour of the 1 hour broadcast was presented as a typical evening radio programming, being interrupted by a series of news bulletins. The first few updates interrupt a program of dance music and describe a series of odd explosions observed on Mars. This followed soon thereafter by a seemingly unrelated report of an unusual object falling on a farm in Grover's Mill, New Jersey. Another brief musical interlude is interrupted by a live report from Grover's Mill. This is where this object fell, where police officials and a crowd of curious onlookers had surrounded the strange cylindrical object. That's a flying saucer, y'all. The situation quickly escalates when Martians emerge from the cylinder and attack using a heat ray, abruptly cutting off the panicked reporter at the scene. This is followed by a rapid series of increasingly alarming news bulletins detailing a devastating alien invasion taking place across the United States and the world. This is diabolical once we'll understand who these aliens were representing. They were representing you. Climaxing with another live report describing giant Martian war machines releasing clouds of poisonous smoke across New York City. Now remember, the attack took place in the main attack rather, first major city, put it that way, was New York City. Fast forward to 9/11. Fast forward to 9/11, family.
Mm-hmm.
This is where this began. After a short break, the program shifts to a more conventional radio drama format and follows a survivor dealing with the aftermath of the invasion and ultimately discovering that the Martians have been defeated not by humans, but by microbes. Very important. And we're going to see that the same theme follows through even to today, and Nasik is going to connect to these so-called recent scientific discoveries that we're going to take a very close look at. Now, this was the simulation on the radio. Now we're going to understand the Roswell UFO incident. We're going to tie all this together. In mid 1947, again, 5 years after the end of World War II, and on the heels of this radio broadcast in 1938, in mid 1947, the United States Army Air Force's balloon crashed at a ranch near Roswell, New Mexico. So this is the official story. They're saying it was a weather balloon. Following wide initial interest in the crashed flying disc, the U.S. military stated that it was merely a conventional weather balloon. Interest subsequently waned until the late 1970s. I want you all to look at this time period now, when ufologists began promoting a variety of increasingly elaborate conspiracy theories, claiming that one or more alien spacecraft had crash landed and that the extraterrestrial occupants had been recovered by the military, who then engaged in a cover-up. Now, this was all set up now by this radio broadcast that put the idea of aliens from outer space
Mm-hmm.
flying in cylinder, what they call disc shaped or flying saucers. So this was again revived in 1947. Interest died down, and then in 1970 it was revived again through these so-called conspiracy theories of this concept of an alien from outer space. In the 1990s, the U.S. military published 2 reports disclosing the true nature of the crashed object, a nuclear test surveillance balloon, all connected with this what? Atomic or nuclear age, nuclear test surveillance balloon from Project Mogul. Nevertheless, the Roswell incident continues to be of interest in popular media, and conspiracy theories surrounding the event persist. Roswell has been described, listen, as the world's most famous, most exhaustively investigated, and most thoroughly debunked UFO claim. So, how is this connected? We'll read the first part of Atomic Suicide. Atomic Suicide by Walter and Leo Russell, published in 1957. Now, again, this Malkiel was published during this very active atomic age, this shift
Mm-hmm.
from the atomic age, and the nuclear age,
Mm-hmm.
which says was what? It ushered in a profound change in socio-political thinking and the course of technological development. This is all going to be tied in to what we are putting on view for the next number of sessions here. Quoting from Atomic Suicide. It starts off with two words, human progress. All right. But we have to correct that. Everything has been inverted, family.
Yes.
So humanity is not progressing in any way. What they are terming as human progress is actually human regress. Human regress is always marked by change. Always marked by change. Key or strategic turning points. The bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, was that a key turning point?
Absolutely.
It says it. It ushered in profound changes in socio-political thinking, and it shaped thinking and perception from that point beyond. We're going to understand that it reached decades uh, before that. It reached several decades before that. Human progress, actually regress, is always marked by change, key or strategic turning points. As civilization unfolds, and they say grows, but we say decreases, or declines. Its concepts change to keep pace with that growth. We'll say decrement instead of growth. Ages of marked wisdom become archaic to ages, they say, of greater wisdom, but it's lesser, not greater. We are proving that our ancients, that you can improve on what they gave us, our ancient ancestors. Malkiel, they had all of this figured out.
Mm-hmm.
And it is emerging to us now just how brilliant they were. So, what they're indicating here is progress is actually regress. And what they are indicating as greater wisdom is actually lesser wisdom because it's moving us further into duality and not into wholeness. That is what it's designed to do. The last 2 or 3 decades, now they're talking from the perspective of 1957. So the last 2 or 3 decades would take us back to the late 1920s, the 1930s, and the 1940s. And we just talked about these seminal events that changed, that worked to change thinking and perception. The last 2 or 3 decades of progress have moved the world ages ahead of the last century, and the last 2 or 3 years have promised to open new doors into that invisible universe where the Creator awaits man's recognition of his omnipresence. So it's a powerful statement, but still in dualistic terms. The Creator and man. The Creator and man. Do we see that?
Mm-hmm.
But they're going to present some very profound uh, observations in this. But we have to understand that this is still from a dualistic standpoint. They're still using dualistic words and dualistic perceptions. They're going to clean this up to a certain extent. We have to know that this is 1957. And as well, they understand that they are presenting to a dualistic minded audience as well. So this is why this dualistic language. But again, um, we're going to clean this up. Now, in terms of the physical, I'm sorry, in terms of the false simulated matrix, we want to take a look at a term that we introduced a while ago in one of the later, the more recent classes. And this is this term hologram. And you'll recall that I read this rather lengthy statement, run on sentence, it seems like. But this was my attempt to make a holistic statement using dualistic language. So bear with me. The entire notion, complete conception, total idea, overall image that we are separate, apart, other than, dual, male, female, inner, outer, above, below, is in and of itself a thoroughly deceptive, patently false, wholly illusory, absolutely erroneous, but specious hologram produced exclusively by the programmed mind. Now, we took a look back at that era of the 1930s, and that these major events that they either caused to occur in real time under the guise of war or under the guise of a simulated war, that these were major events. I'm going to tie all this together to this hologram. That this was designed to program the mind. And in fact, we read that that emphatic entrance within the atomic age did what? Had a profound effect on thinking and perception at the time. This hologram, this specious hologram, is produced exclusively by the programmed mind. What I'm saying is that the simulated matrix is not something that is physical, and that all what appears physical is just a projection of your programmed mind. It is a direct result of human conception, dualistic thought, dualistic perception. That is what creates this hologram that we call reality, that is made up of up, down, in, out, above, below, upon, under, male, female, black, white, dark, light, death, life. Are you all walking with me? A hologram is a three-dimensional image. Listen, I want you to listen to the very specific language of what a hologram is, because if you get the basic conception of a hologram, you're going to have the basic conception of the false simulated matrix. It is a three-dimensional image reproduced from a pattern of interference that is produced by a split of a coherent beam of radiation. In other words, this coherent beam of radiation or light, when it is split, when it becomes dualistic, it produces a pattern of interference, which is then reproduced as a three-dimensional image, or the 3-4-dimensional reality that we think is our environment.
Wow.
It is simply a projection of your mind. Does it make sense, family?
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's go into the history of the hologram. A hologram is a picture of a whole, quote unquote, object, showing it in 3 dimensions. It is a trick of your mind. The fact that it is whole, quote unquote, the fact that it is even an object is a matrixing of your programmed mind. Whatever the object is, someone defined that object for you. And that someone was your programmed parents.
Mm.
They defined this as that, that as this as that, this is up, that is down, this is all of that. The programming began very early. This is why, Malkia, we can't see the kingdom.
Right.
Because we have to become as little infants that did not give credence to illusion, to the hologram. As infants, prior to programming, we see holistically. We've all seen cheap hologram images on credit cards and IDs where they help prevent copying. Far more impressive, listen, far more impressive are large holograms that take the form of a ghostly 3D moving figure. That you can walk around and see from all angles.
Eitai, they did that with Tupac.
Absolutely. But I want you to walk with me now.
Mm-hmm.
If that is something that appears 3D, there is no such thing as an actual 3D object, family.
Mm.
It says you can walk around it and see it from all angles. Holograms, listen, were invented in 1947. Pause.
Wow.
During the atomic age, family.
Mm.
But only perfected after the invention of the laser in 1960. But yet and still, since Roswell, in the atomic age, people they've been seeing flying saucers. Malkiel, I've seen them myself. My father has seen them.
Mm-hmm.
But are these real objects or are they holograms
Mm-hmm.
designed to lock us in to this shift in socio-political thinking and perception that was ushered in very dramatically and emphatically and destructively in 1942?
Mm.
Come on now. Today, they're used in such technologies as compact disc players and checkout scanners, and holograms can be created of the inside of live internal organs to permit doctors to examine the organs in great detail. What are they looking at? Are they looking at the real organs? Absolutely not. It is a projection, family. A projection that is based on the split or the duality of a whole, of a coherent beam of radiation. Y'all got to see this now. And soon, televisions with hologram technology may enable us to watch in 3D. But we've been doing that in the movies since what? Late 1950s and 60s.
Mm-hmm.
Am I correct?
Mm-hmm.
Where you could go
Absolutely.
something in 3D. Now, this is going to tie us into motion picture. It's going to tie us into motion, family. We breaking this thing down now. Now, again, we're going to get into this document that was written in 1957 within the context of all of these things going on. Someone have a question or a comment? All right. We're going to begin to read now.
I have just a brief comment.
Okay.
Commentary on what things that have happened and occurred in the media. In the series Star Trek, it was a regular feature to take holographic vacations.
Yes.
When they would go into project themselves or their consciousness into a hologram.
That's correct.
And take a vacation. And also in the movie, what is it?
Star Wars.
No, in the movie, interception.
The movie. You're saying you're right. It's called.
They had three dimensions of dream state.
Yes.
So really.
Inception,
right. In Inception, they said there was reality, and if you go deep enough into a dream state, you can make a person believe that it's reality. You go into the third level and put an idea in someone's mind, then when they come back to quote reality, they will think that they had the idea.
This is perfect.
Those two things tie in.
Perfect examples. This is why they called that bomb Trinity, because they were trying to affect, and they did, the subconscious aspect of humanity. That's exactly what they did, though. This is what we're getting to. Human progress, which is actually regress, is always marked by change, key or strategic turning points as civilization unfolds or grows, that is, decreases or declines. Its concepts change. To keep pace with that growth. Actually, it's decrement, because our concepts have declined, have fallen from divinity into humanity. We conceive more humanly. And this is all of what we talked about. The ushering in of the atomic age, by this mass destruction of humanity, putting everyone into their lower chakra, Malkiel, locking them into ego and locking them into the false, therefore binding them into the false simulated matrix. These are these key strategic turning points that were enacted for us to keep pace, not with growth, but with decrement, with declination, with the fall. Ages of marked wisdom become archaic to ages of greater, that is, lesser wisdom. These 2 or 3 decades of progress have moved the world ages ahead of the last century, and the last 2 or 3 years have promised to open new doors that the invisible into that invisible universe where the Creator awaits man's recognition and awareness of his omnipresence. Science is discovering God's invisible magnetic mind universe through little peepholes into it, through a newly dawning intelligence. But science is not yet aware of what it is discovering, still not yet aware. Science calls it antimatter. Now, we'll pause there. Antimatter is beyond matter, all right? It's beyond the matrix. This is what has been come to be termed as dark energy, dark matter, all right? Dark energy, dark matter. That is wonderful and hopeful to have discovered and believed that there is something outside of matter, which is seemingly the source of matter emerging from it, is so wonderful that it seems like 1,000 years of progress in a day. So you have matter, antimatter, matter, antimatter. That's the idea, the underlying idea of Krisis Kai, Within separation and duality is what? Wholeness. And within wholeness within wholeness is the idea, the concept of separation and duality. Now here it is, family. Here it is. This is going to lock us in. Matter is motion. If you're taking notes, write that down. Matter is motion. Well, let's take a look at this, Malkiel. Motion is simply the dynamic interaction of two opposite things. The dynamic interaction or relationship between two opposite things. In the Genesis creation story, those two opposite things which create motion in the Genesis creation narrative were the creation of the heavens, that which is above, and the earth, that which is below. The invisible heavens and the material earth. Two opposite concepts. That's all you need. They weren't talking about the physical, listen, the physical creation of a heaven and the earth. They were talking about the mental conception of polar opposites. Please keep that in mind. This is all mental. It is all mental. It is all mental. We're talking about this hologram now, the creation of duality from a coherent whole that creates a reproduction of what we determine as three-dimensional, four-dimensional physical material reality. The antimatter, which now engages the serious attention of science, now this is in 1957 now, is stillness. So you have motion and you have stillness. Now, stillness is a succession of motion. It is when motion ceases. And in Hebraic terms, in the allegorical terms, it is termed the Shabbat,
Mm.
the
Mm-hmm.
rest, the rest. We've already talked about this, family. We've already taught about this. And I'll show you the document where we were conceptualizing the Shabbat rest, conceptualizing, comprehending the seven heavens of the multi-universe and perceiving the Shabbat rest. And you're going to find out once we go through this series that we're going to return to these major elements to give more clarity and meaning to the idea of this simulated matrix and how, family, we have to come to a rest in order to escape it, in order to ascend it. It is not going to take place. This is to the religious minded through work, through service, through servitude, through observance of days, weeks, months, years. That is going to have to come to that work. You're going to have to cease from human work
Mm. Mm-hmm.
because that work locks you into a repetitive, endless, eternal cycle that simply fuels and energizes the matrix.
Makes sense.
Matter is motion. Antimatter is stillness. Matter involves work. Antimatter involves secession from work. It is self-evident that all motion springs from rest and returns to rest for eternal repetition in sequences, which we call electric frequencies. Very important. Electric frequencies, Malkiel, are
Mm-hmm.
dependent on duality, positive and negative. Is that not true?
Mm-hmm.
AC and DC, is that not true?
Mm-hmm.
Alternating currents and direct currents. It is also self-evident that all motion springs from out of the dark. Pause. Darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God did what? Moved,
Yes.
oscillated, moved back and forth. Nasik, define that term. Move. We're going to go back to it real quick. He defined that term for us. Bear with me, family. The Spirit of God moved upon the face of the deep. In the beginning was darkness. That was energy at rest. Energy at rest, family. This term moved is the term rachaf. Is the term rachaf. It means to shake, to oscillate, to fluctuate, to flutter. All right? It also means to grow soft and relax. It was in a position of rest.
Mm-hmm.
Are you all with me?
Mm-hmm.
Rahaf, a position of rest. And it moved from rest into motion and then returns back to rest. This is the 7 days of creation. All right, where everything in the false simulated matrix was created mentally in the mind of quote unquote God first by imagining dualities. And then this thing was projected and perceived as physical motion. If it vibrates, it is not real.
Wow.
It is an illusion. It is a hologram. And we know, well, let's move on. All motion springs from rest and returns to rest for eternal repetition in sequences, which we call electric frequencies. Electric frequencies, again, are dependent upon polarities, dualities, splits. It is also self-evident that all motion springs out of the dark in what? Divided pairs, and multiplies their gaseous beginnings into dense bodies of incandescent suns. This allegorically incorporates the entire first chapter of Genesis, where all things, family, spring forth, are projected from two things interacting, allegorically, heaven and the earth, interacting dynamically. Then disappears into the dark through the gases of themselves. Question: where and what is this invisible dark from which the light of motion appears and into which it disappears? So we've already laid this out, family, in terms of dark energy, dark matter. In the beginning, there was darkness. And out of that darkness, the statement was made, let there be light.
Right.
Let there be light. This invisible dark from which light, the light of motion, appears. And we know that the light was not the light of the sun, because the sun was what? Created on the fourth day, according to the allegory. This was the light created by motion. Is not this the supreme question of all ages? Can there be any other answer to that question than the fact that creation emerges from its creator? This is what we've been saying. The underlying aspect, Malkiel, of emanation, that everything that is created, that we deem created, is simply a mental projection of motion. In other words, a motion picture that divine beings collectively create.
Wow.
And we were in agreement that we would call this thing the physical universe. We were all in agreement. And when we entered into duality, when we entered into diversity, the idea, family, Croesus Kai, the idea of unity was nested within duality, and duality nested within wholeness, unity. Are you all with me?
Gang.
The greatest thinkers in science have repeatedly said matter emerges from space and is swallowed up by space in some unknown, mysterious manner. The word space is a rather casual word to use in place of the Creator. Likewise, it is a misleading word, for space is not an expanse of something outside of matter. It is as omnipresent within matter as it is without, and it is in control of matter from within as well as from without. If you go back and look at the films by Nasik Aharone, when he was talking about space as the most densest and most energetic aspect, it is not nothingness. It is the most dense and most energetic aspect of creation. And it lies out of the universe, and it lies outside of the created matrix as well. Future generations of enlightened men will cease thinking of this electric universe as being matter and substance. This is where we are. We are at the doorway of this, family, and this is what is necessary. They will know it for what it is, which is motion only. This is what I want to introduce to us, this higher conception of matter and physicality, the material aspect, the substantive aspect, the substance aspect, what we deem as substance, what we define as matter, what we define as physical, is simply motion. It is the interaction of dualities. It's what produces that. It's what produces the hologram, this split in the coherent beam of energy or coherent energy. They talked about it in terms of splitting the atom.
Mm.
When the idea of substance has passed out of our thinking and simulation of substance by motion, that is the simulated reality, will have taken its place, mankind will then comprehend his mind unity, or we'll say mental unity, with the universal mentality. We won't use the word mind, although I understand what they're talking about there. When we will have understood this simulated aspect of substance by motion, we will then comprehend the mental unity and the universal mentality. We will understand, as Yeshua, Jesus put it in the allegory, family, I and my Father are one. We've been just giving intellectual assent to that and not truly
Right.
understanding or understanding or comprehending that in a practical manner, in an energetic manner, from a mental standpoint of divine perception and thinking. And he will know, listen, his body for what it is, merely an instrument for creating form images of divine mental thinking. They just say mind thinking, but they have it capitalized. That is divine mental thinking and perception. This is how you create your own world. And we're going to have to create, family, our perception, our concept, our image of a holistic world before we transition from the seminar. You gotta have somewhere to go, Malkia.
Right. Right.
This, this is called, family, the New Jerusalem.
Mm. Mm.
This
Wow.
is called the New Jerusalem. Malkiel, no hammer, no nails,
Yes.
created wholly from the divine imagination.
Yes. Not no house.
But this holistic divine mentality is the only thing that is going to create it. Because if we remain dualistic, we will continue to project dualistic and physical things
Mm-hmm.
for us to inhabit, and it keeps us locked in. We have to bypass the hologram. And in bypassing the hologram, meaning getting back to that coherent being, that coherent energy that is holism. As we close this figure number 6, it says the internal omnipresent vacuum zero. The reality of cause. Like causes always produce like effects. Like causes always produce like effects. The omnipresent vacuum zero. Now remember, it was Nassim Haramein again, and we're going to go back to some of his teachings on this so-called vacuum that they call space, all right? That they call space. These individuals are defining it as the reality of cause, the one magnetic light of mentality. They say mind, the one magnetic light of mentality. Remember, the hologram is that one coherent being until it splits. Then the splitting, the duality, causes a 3D image to be reproduced that we what? Assume is physical, that we define as physical, that we define as an object, that we define as a physical body, that we define as this room, as this chair you're sitting in, as the tree that you're looking at supposedly outside of the room. That is all a false specious projection. Specious means having the look of being genuine or real. That is the definition of the false matrix. It looks real, it feels real, it seems real. The real universe, it says, of knowing mind or mentality at rest. This is why, Malkiel, meditation is
Mm-hmm.
important in this. To quiet the dialogue of the mind, because the dialogue of the mind is uh, constantly defining things in terms of physicality, in
Mm-hmm.
terms of whatever program is running. And you have to quiet the mind or cause it to rest. Are you all with me?
Okay.
The real universe of knowing mentality or the mental at rest, the expansion in, well, we won't even talk in terms of that because they're using Newtonian physics. Um, we're not even gonna explore that because we got to deconstruct that so much. They're using it in terms of Newtonian physics, like we said yesterday, which describes the cosmos and the universe in physical or mechanical terms. It is fluid. It is fluid, less mechanical and more fluid. But that is the mindset that they were stuck into at that particular point, Newtonian physics. So they're going to try to describe this thing as a piston, a piston. Again, mechanical terms. We won't get into that. Physical, figure 6 rather, symbolizes the uncreated universe, or when it was in the Genesis family, tohu vabohu, without form and void. Nothing was defined, nothing was formed, nothing was shaped, nothing had come into quote unquote existence, physical material existence. So that is always the starting point of rest. Tohu vabohu, what we refer to as chaos. That just mean it does not mean disorderly. It means
Right.
it means matter at rest, or in an uncreated state at rest. That's why the Shabbat is the 8th day and not the 7th. We explained that before. It's the 8th day. Because they never talk about this uncreated. This is the cipher, zero. So it would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which makes 8.
Mm-hmm.
The zero vacuum, see, they use the term zero here, the zero vacuum, universe at rest, from which the objective electric universe of motion emerges to manifest eternal life by simulating it in cycles of motion. It is a simulation. It is a projection, family. This is God's omnipresent universe of idea and desire. Now, this desire, family, is Elios, described as the third of those more weighty matters of the law. Elios, affinity, compassion, desire.
Mm-hmm.
For what? The expression of idea. That's what sets it in motion. That is the Elios, the love, for God so loved the world that he
Mm-hmm.
gave his own, that it allegorically is just talking about how an idea is expressed, and there must be that affinity or that desire or that compassion or that energy, that impetus to what? Express the idea by what? Moving forms which symbolize idea. This is the universe, the imaginer who builds forms in image of his imaging for giving and re-giving of cyclic intervals, which unknowing man calls life and death. We're going to end right here because this is just the beginning of our connecting this to what Ben Ami gave us and where we start each of these sessions with, causing the diverse components, the four components, the four elements of the life force, fire, water, wind, and earth, to be unified and applied as a whole in order to do what? not create Malkiel,
Mm-hmm.
atomic energy or nuclear energy, but a new form of energy that is eternal,
Yes.
that is inexplicable, that
Mm-hmm.
is immeasurable. All right? But we
Mm-hmm.
must begin with a basic understanding of the fact that just like separation is nested within unity, and unity is nested within separation, that life is nested within death, and death is nested within life.
Yes.
That is a divine holistic concept
Yes.
in duality and in our profoundly human conception and perception. We have thought of life and death as two diametrically opposed, competing aspects. We're going to find the science of this very profound.
Eitai, that concept, if you look at the serpent or snake, that concept is perfect because as it sheds its skin,
Yes, sir.
you know what I'm saying, and it keeps that cycle of death, but it continues to live,
Absolutely. That's the only way it grows.
grows. Absolutely, yes.
That's the
Mm-hmm.
only way it grows and truly progresses. And those
Yes.
those two concepts of life and death, they're nested within themselves.
Yes.
They are interrelated. So we have to begin to create a holistic, divine thought process and perception in order to get this. We have to define the simulated matrix as being all mental. That's what all anything is.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to be able to look at the simulated matrix as being not something that is out there, but the simulated matrix causes us to believe that something is out there. See, Roswell, the War of the Worlds and all that kind of stuff, World War II, the atomic age, it all projected very dramatically and very violently, projected our perception in an outward direction to outer space, to Mars, to
To the moon.
to the moon, to 4 light
Mm-hmm.
years away, to external minerals and nutrients within plants and animals to sustain life.
Mm.
All right, through the depths of those things,
Mm-hmm.
because look, I mean, when you eat a plant, you kill it
Yes.
because you remove that one unit of sun energy, that solar energy that it had, and you incorporate that, and you're left
Mm.
with dead matter that
Mm.
you expel as waste. Same thing happens with animals. From an energetic standpoint, is no different
Mm-hmm.
because you're only getting one unit of energy per 10 units, right?
Yes.
So, you know, we got to move beyond this solar system. This is what we've been emphasizing. And the move is going to take place, family, mentally. Mentally. mentally, not through observance of days, years, weeks, holy days, not simply,
Right.
not simply through the observance of a diet.
Right.
We've been emphasizing this. So we're going to stop here with life and death. We're going to begin here, tomorrow. I'm telling you, this is a vast uh, subject matter, in terms of wrapping our arms around it. But we have the capacity to do that, But we're going to take our time. We're going to walk through this step by step because it's necessary that we have a clear conception of these things. So, with that, I'm going to end this particular session.